This episode is brought to you by Squarespace. If you guys are looking for the perfect street photography camera, right now is the best time to get into it. Now today we're going to be talking about two of my favorites, the Ricoh GR3 as well as the Fujifilm X-Pro 2. Now both of these cameras are great, but they are wildly different. And I want to talk about some of the strengths between both of them, some of the similarities, but also a lot of the differences. And at the end of this video, I will be sharing my choice when it comes to the better camera for street photography. Let's go. Alright guys, so both of these cameras are a couple of years old now. I believe the Ricoh GR3 is like 4 years old, 3 or 4 years old. When did the Ricoh GR3 release?
I found this on the web.
2019. 3 years old. I'm not far off. When did the Fuji X-Pro 2 release?
Here's what I found.
2016. So the X-Pro 2 is 6 years old and the GR3 is 3 years old. Now, even though they are a little bit different in the amount of time that they were released, they are very similar. They both have 24 megapixel sensors. That's probably just about the only similarity because these cameras are wildly different. Now, the X-Pro 2 and the GR3, I feel like they cater to two different audiences. Now, the Ricoh GR3 is this kind of small point and shoot street photography camera. And I will go out and say that this is a dedicated street photography camera because when you look at all of the features that Ricoh packed into this, it all kind of caters to what street photographers want. Starting off with the focal length. Now, the lens here on the front says 18.3 megapixels, but this has an APS-C size sensor in this tiny body. So that equivalent ends up being 28 millimeter. Now with a 28 millimeter focal length, that is amazing for street photography. It's the focal length that Gary Winogrand used. It's the focal length that Alex Webb used for a little bit. It is an amazing focal length. It's wide enough to capture scenes, to capture landscape. They even have a built-in macro mode. So if you did want to get really close to your subject, you could turn that on and get some pretty interesting results. I've used it a couple of times myself. But where the GR3 stands, in my opinion, overpowers the X-Pro 2 is the settings that it has for street photography. The first one being snap focus. Now, if you guys don't know what snap focus is, essentially it's a setting in your camera that you can set to a specific distance. You can go, 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 feet. You set a specific distance, and if you full press your shutter, it's automatically going to focus that lens to that set desired distance. And the best part is you can use this along with the autofocus. So let's say you're walking down the street and you're using your autofocus, you're focusing here, you're focusing there, but somebody's approaching you and you need to capture them within that zone. All you have to do, folks, is full press and that camera lens will automatically focus in to that desired spot. And this is great for capturing, just like snapshots, for focusing really quickly, because with a full press snap, you have a predetermined focus, it's going to hit every single time. It's essentially zone focusing in a digital camera. And the way Ricoh has revolutionized the way that photographers shoot with just that feature goes to show that this is a dedicated street photography camera. And in my opinion, it's probably one of the best of all time. Now, the Ricoh GR3 has snap focus. The GR2, its predecessor, has snap focus as well. But something that the GR2 doesn't have that the GR3 does is a metering mode called highlight weighted metering. You guys, highlight weighted metering is really, really fun. It's what's going to get you those really kind of fanho-like looking contrasty images where your highlights are going to be perfectly in exposure, but your shadows are going to be completely tuned out. And the effect that you get from this is this really dramatic look. I'm popping up some photos here on the screen and you guys can see that there are tons and tons of ways to utilize this feature. Now with the highlight weighted metering mode, you can see that on the back screen, it'll show exactly what you're going to get. So with that said, you can pretty much just turn that on and walk around and shoot with kind of that mindset and just be able to capture all of these things without having to adjust your exposure compensation on the fly. The ease of use that this camera has for street photography is insane. Everything you need to adjust on the street is going to be adjustable with just one hand. Your thumb here on the back or just here on the front with the scroll wheel. It's very ergonomic, and the size is really what makes this thing probably one of the best things ever. And the battery life is pretty good. It's not bad. You probably get a full 2 hours of shooting with just one single battery, and there's also in-body image stabilization built into this camera. It is insane the amount of features that are packed into this thing. But with that said, there are a couple of things that I feel like are a downside to this camera that I want to talk about that are a plus in the Fuji X-Pro 2. But now I want to move over into the Fuji X-Pro 2 and talk about what I like about it, also the differences between that and the GR3. But before we get into that, I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to our sponsor for this episode, the good folks over at Squarespace. Squarespace is your all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. With how saturated social media has made it for photographers, one of the best ways to stand out is to have your own dedicated website. Now, Squarespace offers a ton of different award-winning templates that you can use to get started in just minutes, as well as an option for a portfolio, an e-commerce shop, a blog, and probably my new favorite feature, the appointment scheduling. If you are a working photographer, you can send your clients to the appointment scheduling tab and they can see when you are available for booking. Super simple, super easy, and very, very effective. So if you guys want to get started with your own personalized website today, head over to squarespace.com/KingJapes and enter promo code KingJapes at checkout, and you guys can get 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or a website. Huge thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's episode. All right, so here is the Fujifilm X-Pro 2, and let's talk about some of the differences right off of the bat. First and foremost, it is a rangefinder style camera. So in the very left corner, you have a kind of window here, and that is an optical viewfinder / EVF, and that's very, very useful. That's already 1 point over the GR3. The second thing that this camera has that the GR3 doesn't is the fact that you can change out the lenses. And Fuji lenses, man, are absolutely incredible. The one that I have mounted on top here is the 18mm f2, and this is your 28mm equivalent. But for a very long time, you guys, I was shooting with this lens right here, which is the Fujifilm 23mm f2. And the 23mm f2, in my opinion, is probably the best priced Fujifilm lens out on the market today. It ends up being a 35mm equivalent, and it is an amazing, amazing lens. I've made some of my most favorite photographs with this lens alone. So that's another point that you can add over to the X-Pro 2, that you can actually change the lenses. And there are a ton of other lens options out on the market right now, but I just don't have much experience with them. The X-Pro 2, another thing that kind of sets it apart from the GR3 is that it's very tactical. You have all of your settings here on top ready to go. Your shutter speed, you have your aperture built in on your lens right here, because it really does give you a very similar experience to shooting a rangefinder. Exposure compensation dial, and overall the grip of the camera is just a lot more substantial because it is a much larger camera than the GR3. It has 24 megapixels just like the GR3, and there's also a bunch of Fujifilm's in-camera film simulations, which are great. You can make different recipes and kind of emulate different film looks. And holy crap, it's raining outside. Sorry, I just got distracted. First rain, woo. You can emulate different film stocks, and I have a Portrait 400 recipe video that I am currently working on, so all the photographs that you have seen on the screen has come from that. So stay tuned for that, you guys. I'm very excited to share that with you. Now, the overall experience though when shooting with this camera is extremely different. You have options to manual focus, you have options for autofocus. You don't have snap focus, but you do have a depth of field scale built into the camera that you can use to kind of zone focus. Where the Ricoh GR3 is a true street photography camera, the X-Pro 2 almost serves as a more versatile all-around camera. And there are a couple of things in this camera that you could say are directly suited to street photography, but it doesn't have highlight weighted metering. It doesn't have snap focus. You can turn on manual focus and then set instant autofocus for the back, so that, you know, kind of works like that. But overall, the X-Pro 2 is more of a versatile camera, and you can do a lot more with it than you can with the GR3. But folks, if we are only talking about street photography between the X-Pro 2 and the GR3, which one is better? It's hard to say. Let's start off with price points. New, these are around $900. You can get them used between $600 to $800. The X-Pro 2 body only is, I'm not even gonna say the new price because I don't even know it, but used, you can pick it up between $500 to $800, and then you need a lens still. So out the door, probably cheaper is gonna be the GR3. But the X-Pro 2, again, you have different lens options that you can use from, and that's where I feel like the X-Pro 2 shines there aren't a ton of limitations. You could customize this thing with as many accessories as you want, with as many different focal lengths and lenses that you can, ever need. You have the EVF, you have the OVF, you have shutter speeds all the way to 1/8,000th of a second. Film simulations built in. This camera is just absolutely versatile. And I'll go out to say, if you wanted to just have one camera and one camera only that you would use across street photography, portrait photography, landscape photography, the X-Pro 2 is probably the best choice. But when it comes to street photography and street photography only, the GR3, in my opinion, is king. Yes, there are some limitations with focal lengths, and there are a couple of simulations built in, but they aren't that great as in like the X-Pro 2. But I think the limitations really force you to be more creative with your street photography. Like I said, this is a pure street photography camera with a 28mm focal length, snap focus with highlight weighted metering. The way they designed it, how small it is, how compact it is. If you wanted to just take a backpack and travel to Cuba, you could probably do that with the GR3 and be perfectly happy with all of the images that you captured. You don't need to change fiddle lenses. You don't need to carry a bunch of extra heavy batteries. You could probably carry 10 of these little batteries and be good, man. These are puny, these are tiny, and the fact that the form factor of this camera is extremely small allows you to just kind of go under the radar and create more of those candid street photos that everyone loves. So like I said in the beginning, I would make a choice between the X-Pro 2 or the GR3 for street photography. The GR3 is my winner, because even though the X-Pro 2 is an amazing camera, I use it a lot for street photography. It makes really good images. It's also just a lot more versatile. You can use it for street photography, portrait photography. It's probably just the better camera all around. But again, for street photography purposes, my choice is the Ricoh GR3. But that's going to be the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know your thoughts and questions or comments in the section below. Which one do you guys prefer, the X-Pro 2, the Ricoh GR3? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. But you guys, we are nearing 140,000 subscribers here on YouTube. Just want to say I'm very, very, very grateful for you guys, man. Thank you all for tuning into these episodes. Subscribe if you are new to this channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As always, Notes Gang.